Imagine living on the streets, no roof, no hope, just you and your little girl shivering under a diner's overhang. What if one letter changed everything? She didn't expect the letter to find her. People like her weren't supposed to be located by anything official. Not by mail carriers, not by bills, certainly not by inheritance notices. But that morning, huddled with her daughter beneath the overhang behind the diner, Mara Reed watched a woman in a county jacket scan the alley with a puzzled face, holding an envelope like it was a bird that refused to land. "Mara Reed," she called, uncertain but determined. Mara froze. Lily, half wrapped in the patched sleeping bag they shared, tightened her grip on her mother's arm. The woman looked nothing like trouble. Yet trouble often disguised itself in harmless clothing. "Who's asking?" Mara said, stepping forward just enough to block Lily with her body. The woman consulted the envelope again. "County Probate Office. I've been trying to reach you for 3 months. 3 months?" That was the distance between summer and the first morning the ground hardened beneath their feet. The woman extended the letter. "It's about your grandmother, Eliza Ward." The name hit like a faint echo from a childhood she rarely walked toward. Her grandmother's voice, her small mountain cabin, the smell of pine sap on skin. Memories that lived like moth wings, delicate, powdery, impossible to touch without losing something. Mara took the envelope slowly. "She passed?" she asked, already knowing the answer. 2 winters ago, the woman said her estate was delayed, complicated, but you're the last living heir. The property is yours now. The property. Mara nearly laughed, though nothing in her life was funny enough to deserve it. A property belonging to the grandmother who died poor, whose entire world was a sagging mountain shack and a stubborn old horse she insisted the county would never take. Mara had always believed her grandmother owned nothing at all. Loss had a way of teaching you that people like you inherited only debt, regret, and maybe the shape of someone else's mistakes. Yet here was a letter in her hand, something her grandmother left behind. Something that might be shelter for a night, or a week if the roof hadn't caved. Something with a door her daughter could lock. She signed the delivery slip with fingers stiff from cold, thanked the woman, and tucked the letter inside her coat. Lily leaned against her. "Where is it?" she whispered. Mara opened the envelope slowly, half expecting the paper to vanish. Inside was a simple document, the deed to a piece of land in the Appalachian foothills near a mountain whose name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. The coordinates pulsed at her like a heartbeat. A handwritten note on yellowed county paper read, "Occupant rights valid. Beware structural weakness. Outbuilding condemned. No taxes owed until reassessment." It was the kind of warning that tried to sound helpful, but smelled slightly of doom. Still, it was a place. A place that was hers. "We're going home," Mara said, though home wasn't a word she'd believed in for a long time. They gathered their things. 2 worn backpacks, 1 sleeping bag, a thrift store coat that barely remembered insulation, and boarded the bus with coins scraped from the emergency jar. Lily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder as the town shrank behind them, replaced by wide fields in a sky that looked like it didn't care who you were as long as you kept moving. Mara closed her eyes and let the motion steady her heartbeat. Going back to those mountains felt like walking into a memory she had abandoned deliberately. But the road didn't ask her to confess anything. It carried them upward, past barren trees, past clusters of houses sloping toward each other for warmth, past streams with voices only the patient could hear. The bus rattled through the last paved stretch before climbing toward the foothills. By the time it stopped at the end of the route, a gravel turnout near an abandoned gas station. Twilight had begun folding itself across the ridges. Mara slung their bags over her shoulder, took Lily's hand, and began the walk down the narrow mountain road she had last seen at 17. The air was sharper here, thinner in a way that forced you to breathe honestly. The forests rose in tall, quiet lines on either side. Lily's breath clouded in front of her. Small but determined. "What was she like?" Lily asked. "Grandma Eliza?" Mara hesitated. "Stubborn," she said. "Kind in ways that didn't look like kindness. She believed the mountain taught you what you needed to learn." "What did you learn?" Lily asked. Mara let out a slow breath. I didn't stay long enough to find out it was true. She'd run from this place at 17, chasing work and escape and a future that didn't smell like damp timber and old ghost stories. Her grandmother had told her the mountain held more secrets than people did, and that wasn't always meant to comfort. But now, climbing toward a house that might not even stand, Mara felt the pull of something she couldn't name. The path narrowed, growing familiar in ways her mind refused to fully acknowledge. A fallen tree she used to balance on as a child. A bend in the road where the blackberry bushes once clawed at her ankles. A gap in the ridge where the sunlight slipped through in the mornings, the same way it used to slip into her grandmother's kitchen. And then through the thinning trees she saw it. The house, if you could still call it that. The roof sagged like a tired shoulder. Boards curled away from the frame. The porch had surrendered to gravity years ago, collapsing into a sprawl of lumber and weeds. Windows were missing or broken, leaving dark squares where eyes should have been. Mom! Lily whispered, gripping her sleeve. It's really old. It is, Mara said. But it's ours. They approached cautiously, each step sinking into the damp soil. The house loomed, weather-beaten and proud in the way of things that refused to disappear. Mara pushed open the front door, half expecting it to protest, but it swung inward with a sigh, as though the house had been holding its breath for years, and finally recognized someone worth releasing it for. Inside, dust drifted in shafts of fading light. The walls were lined with old wooden planks, their knots like patient eyes. The floor sagged but held. Lily walked in slowly, wide-eyed. It's like a story, she said. One with ghosts. Mara answered quietly, though not unkindly. The living room still held her grandmother's rocking chair, though its runners were cracked. A cast iron stove hunched in the corner, rusted but intact. The air carried the faint smell of pine, earth, and time. It was cold, but not the biting cold of the alley. They were inside, and that alone felt like a miracle stitched together from scraps. Mara set their bags down near the stove and drew in a deep breath. We'll make a fire, she said. It will be warm. They gathered fallen branches from just outside the door, snapping brittle sticks and easing them into the stove. The first spark took quickly, rising into a flame that flickered like hope, finding footing. Warmth seeped slowly into the room. Lily curled up in the sleeping bag near the stove while Mara explored the kitchen. The counters were dusty but familiar. A wooden drawer stuck stubbornly until she coaxed it open, revealing a jumble of old utensils, a corkscrew, and a folded note written in her grandmother's cramped handwriting. If you're reading this, you found your way back. Good. The mountain's been waiting for you. Mara closed her eyes as the words echoed through her. She hadn't expected this, her grandmother reaching across years with the steadiness she'd always had. She tucked the note into her pocket. She'd read it again when she was ready. Behind the kitchen, a narrow hallway led to the back of the house. The boards creaked with each step, but the house seemed to adjust to their presence, as if relearning the rhythm of feet on its floors. At the end of the hall was the bedroom Mara had once shared with her mother before they left this place behind. Dust lay thick on the windowsill. A quilt faded to near colorlessness covered the old iron bed frame. She brushed it lightly with her hand. Mom, Lily called from the living room. There's something outside. Mara hurried back, heart thumping. Through the cracked front window, she saw a shape moving slowly across the yard. Large, lumbering, familiar in a deep way she couldn't immediately place. Then, with a strange jolt, the recognition landed. It can't be, she whispered. The old horse, her grandmother's horse, a chestnut gelding with a streak of silver down his muzzle, moving stiffly but deliberately toward the house. He looked impossibly ancient, like a creature carved from memory. But he was alive. Mom, Lily said softly. Is that yours? No, Mara said, her voice thinning. He belonged to Grandma Eliza. The horse stopped a few feet from the porch, what was left of it, and met Mara's gaze with an expression that felt almost human, as though he had been waiting, too. Mara stepped outside carefully, hands raised slightly. Easy, boy, she murmured, though her voice shook. She reached toward him, and he lowered his head until his muzzle pressed gently against her palm. His breath was warm, steady. Lily stood beside her, awestruck. "What's his name?" "Sage," Mara whispered. She swallowed. "He was the last thing my grandmother cared for." Sage flicked his ear, then nudged Mara's coat pocket. She frowned, reaching inside, and pulled out the folded note she'd found in the kitchen drawer. The horse nudged it again, almost insistently. "What is it?" Lily asked. Mara opened the note fully for the first time. The handwriting trembled with age, but the words were clear. "If Sage is still alive, follow him. He remembers what I couldn't tell you." Goosebumps rose along her arms. Sage stepped back, turned slowly, and began walking toward the tree line behind the house. "Mom!" Lily whispered. Mara hesitated. The sky was darkening. The forest loomed. Following an old horse into the woods was not the sort of decision any sensible person would make at dusk. But nothing about their lives lately had been sensible. And somewhere in her grandmother's voice, buried under years of silence, was a truth she had fled, but now felt obligated to face. "Grab your jacket," Mara said softly. "We're going with him." Lily ran inside, re-emerging moments later. The horse waited patiently at the edge of the woods, tail flicking. They followed him into the trees. The forest swallowed them quickly, its canopy blotting out the last of the light. Sage's steps were slow but deliberate, never straying from a winding trail that Mara only half remembered. "Did she hide something?" Lily whispered. "Maybe," Mara answered. "Or maybe she left something she knew I'd need." The woods grew thicker, the air colder. A fog drifted low along the ground like breath that refused to disperse. After several minutes, Sage stopped before a narrow clearing she'd forgotten existed. At its center stood a structure she had never seen before or had blocked out of memory so entirely it felt new. A small outbuilding, stone, almost like a storage shed, but older than the house itself. Its wooden door hung crooked, marked with deep scratches that made Mara's skin tighten. "What is this place?" Lily asked. Mara didn't answer. Her grandmother had warned the county about this outbuilding. Condemned, the deed had said. Yet it stood solid as a secret. She approached slowly. The door creaked as she pushed it open. The interior smelled of damp wood and rust, but beneath that was something else, something metallic, faintly sweet, like old minerals. She raised her flashlight. The beam cut across a room full of crates stacked nearly to the rafters, each marked with the faded insignia of an old mining company that had gone bankrupt decades before she was born. Her heart raced. Her grandmother had always claimed the mining company stole something from the mountain and from their family. No one believed her. Not the county, not the town, not Mara's mother who dragged her away from this place and told her to forget the ramblings of an old woman clinging to fairy tales. But these crates were not fairy tales. They were evidence, proof. She stepped forward, brushing dust from the nearest crate. Lily hovered close. "Mom, what is it?" "I don't know," Mara whispered. "But whatever it is, she hid it for a reason." She found a rusted crowbar near the wall and wedged it under the crate's lid, forcing it open with a grunt. The wood cracked. The lid fell away. Inside, wrapped in canvas, were dozens of small metal cylinders, each stamped with a date and numbers. Not numbers, coordinates. Lily leaned closer. "What are those?" Mara lifted one carefully. It was surprisingly heavy. The metal felt warm despite the cold air. She had seen objects like this in documentaries, in old geological surveys, core samples, bedrock cores, geological profiles taken from deep beneath the mountain. She unwrapped another and another, perfectly preserved, untouched, taken from a company that had, according to every official record, never drilled anywhere near her grandmother's land. Mara's pulse quickened. "Mom?" Lily asked quietly. "Why would she keep rocks?" Mara swallowed hard. "Because these aren't just rocks." Before she could continue, Sage snorted sharply behind them, ears pinned, muscles tensing. Mara turned. The horse backed away from the shed, nostrils flaring at the darkness beyond the trees. Something moved there. Not an animal, not an animal, something heavier, watching. Mara's breath caught. Whoever or whatever had been waiting was no longer patient. And her grandmother's secret was much bigger than a mountain's memory. Lily, Mara whispered, gripping her daughter's hand. We need to go now. Sage pawed the ground urgently. The forest grew unnervingly still. Mara shut the crate, grabbed the nearest core sample, and pulled Lily close as they stepped out into the cold air. Something cracked a branch in the darkness. Too deliberate. Too close. Mara's grandmother had warned her. The mountain teaches you what you need to learn. Tonight, the lesson was beginning, and someone else knew they were here. But wait, what if the secret wasn't just hidden rocks? What if it could rewrite an entire town's history? The house waited like a held breath. The forest pressed inward. Sage nudged them urgently toward the path. Mara didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel eyes in the trees and her grandmother's voice pushing her forward. The secret had been found, and the mountain was no longer silent. Mara barely slept that night. Every time the house shifted, the sound felt like someone testing the floorboards. When wind moved through the trees, it seemed to whisper her name, reminding her that the mountain held more history than she could see. She dreamed in uneasy flashes. Her grandmother hauling heavy crates alone, lanterns swinging while men in company jackets turned away as if silence were part of their contract. When morning finally came, she rose exhausted. But Lily woke with the soft confidence of a child who believed that if her mother kept moving, everything might yet find balance. Frost coated the yard in pale crystals. Sage stood near the porch, breath puffing, ears pointed toward the tree line like a sentinel planted by the mountain itself. Mara brewed thin tea in a dented pot, and set the wrapped core sample on the table beside the deed. The metal cylinder looked ordinary now, but its presence filled the room like pressure beneath stone. What if it's nothing? She whispered. Lily shook her head with simple certainty. Grandma hid it. That means someone didn't want it found. Mara knew the truth carried weight, especially when buried deep. They had to find someone who could read the stone, someone the town wouldn't dismiss as quickly as they dismissed Eliza years ago. Mara wrapped the sample carefully in a towel, placing it in her backpack. Before leaving, she rested her palm against the kitchen wall. Watch the place, she murmured. The wood stayed cool, but something about the house felt awake, as though listening. Sage followed them to the edge of the yard, then stopped deliberately, watching the tree line with the protective stillness of an animal that understood danger, lived in silence as much as in action. The road down the mountain was slick with wet leaves. They walked slowly, hands brushing occasionally as the morning fog thinned. Halfway down, Lily spoke. If we fix this, will it fix Grandma's story? Mara considered her words. Maybe not fix, she said, but make it heard. The town appeared below them. Quiet, worn, familiar, but changed. Buildings sagged with age, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke mixed with old machinery. Mara felt exposed, carrying a truth no one had asked her to bring into daylight. But turning back wasn't an option anymore. The library smelled of old paper and dust. Comforting, steady. The woman behind the desk, gray hair twisted into a clip, looked up sharply. You look like you need answers, not directions, she said. Mara set the wrapped core on the desk. The woman's eyes widened as the towel fell away. Haven't seen one of those in decades. When Mara explained they'd found crates full of them behind her grandmother's house, the librarian stiffened. Who was your grandmother? Eliza Ward, Mara said softly. Recognition flickered in the woman's face, mixed with something like regret. Eliza came here once shouting about stolen land. The librarian said people thought she was unwell. Mara swallowed hard, remembering her own doubts years ago. She wasn't, she said. She just didn't know how to make people listen. The librarian nodded slowly. Jim's here today. Retired geologist. Tuesdays are his map days. She returned with a tall stooped man in flannel who handled the core as if it were sacred. He turned it toward the window, examining layers of stone with quiet intensity. You know where they claimed this came from? He asked. They said their own lease, Mara answered. Jim shook his head. Not by the coordinates stamped here. This hole sits under your grandmother's land. Off lease, off record. He pointed to a pale band within the stone. Spodumene lithium. They knew this mountain held it. They drilled quietly. They hid it. And they were hoping no one would ever piece it together. The librarian let out a small gasp. She tried to prove it back then. Mara steadied herself. She wasn't wrong, she said. Just alone. Jim exhaled slowly. You need a lawyer willing to get loud. Harper's office sat in an old white house with a crooked sign reading, "No appointment." No problem. The lawyer, mid-40s with tired, sharp eyes, listened without interrupting as Mara laid everything out. The letter, the shed, the crates, Jim's conclusions. Harper examined the core, then nodded. Jim's the best we've got. And this stamp tells a story the energy company won't want told. She slid a contract across the desk. I work on contingency. If we win or settle, I take a cut. If we lose, you owe nothing. But this, she tapped the core. This has teeth. The following weeks blurred into paperwork, affidavits, and interviews. Jim wrote a sworn statement explaining the mineral layers. The librarian unearthed old meeting notes, where Eliza had been dismissed as misinformed. A retired drill technician came forward with a brittle ledger documenting off-lease samples and warnings ignored by the company. In the margins of one page, in familiar handwriting, Mara found samples with E. Ward. Now Mountain remembers. The evidence grew heavier. The energy company responded with a thick stack of denials, claiming confusion, faulty memory, and forged stamps. At the preliminary hearing, the company lawyer suggested Eliza had been unstable. Harper stood slowly. Poverty isn't instability, she said. It's what happens when people with power decide some voices aren't worth hearing. The courtroom shifted. The judge ruled the case would proceed. Not long after, Mara noticed a man in a dark parka trailing them around town. Sometimes he waited near their truck. Once she saw him standing at the tree line near the mountain road, still as a post. She tried to reassure herself it was coincidence. But dread nestled in her ribs. The confrontation came on a dim afternoon when Mara found an SUV angled across the mountain road. She stopped the truck a safe distance. The man stepped out, hands visible. Miss Reed, he said. Daniel Carter, Energy Company. Lily stiffened beside her. We both know where this is heading. Let's avoid the mess. He offered an enormous sum in exchange for rights and silence. The number made Mara's breath catch. Safety, stability, everything she'd never had seen suddenly within reach. If you're offering that, she said, it's worth more. His expression hardened. Court is unpredictable, he said. Neighbors resent scandals. A settlement keeps things peaceful. Silent, she corrected. That's not peace. He stepped closer. You're making a mistake. Mara held his gaze. If I make one, she said, it'll be mine? He moved aside, allowing her to pass. Sage met them in the yard, ears back, body taut. Harper fumed when she heard about the roadside offer. He's rattled, she said. If they're negotiating in the shadows, they're scared of daylight. Good. Let's drag them into it. The fight felt bigger now, larger than money, larger than revenge. They prepared for trial. Harper organized the evidence like a general planning a siege. Jim rehearsed his testimony. The retired technician practiced reading his own shaky notes aloud. Meanwhile, town gossip swelled. Some applauded Mara. Others muttered about troublemakers. One evening, Harper arrived breathless. They blinked, she said, placing a folder on the table. They're offering a settlement. Massive, larger than I hoped. Someone higher up got nervous. The figure was staggering. Enough to change everything about how Mara and Lily lived. Enough to protect the mountain for generations. What do they want in return? Mara asked. Mineral rights, Harper said. With restrictions. They can drill underground but can't touch surface land or water sources. And I demanded no non-disclosure clause. You'd be free to talk. If we go to trial, we might win more or lose everything. Mara's hand hovered over the paper. She thought about her grandmother's stubbornness, about the years she spent warning people who laughed at her. She thought about Lily's worn shoes and their barely insulated kitchen. Justice mattered, but so did security, and the mountains still needed a guardian. They signed, not in triumph, but in solemn recognition that victories come in different shapes. Overnight the story spread. Reporters arrived. Cameras pointed toward the ridge like it was a newly discovered continent. Some townsfolk cheered, others grumbled about outsiders stirring up the past. Conveniently forgetting the company's trespass began the story decades earlier. Mara ignored the noise. She focused on the mountain, on the house that no longer felt abandoned, on the feeling that something buried had finally been allowed to breathe. The first transfer hit her account like a silent shockwave. Money didn't transform her, just quieted the constant fear humming under her thoughts. The roof was replaced, the windows repaired. They built Sage a sturdy barn where he could rest without the wind slicing through broken boards. "He looks proud," Lily said. "He looks like he knew this was coming," Mara replied. The shed became a small memorial to Eliza's fight. Jim and the retired technician mounted a plaque over the door. "Eliza Ward, Keeper of Proof." Beneath it, smaller text read, "She told the truth before anyone profited from hearing it." School children visited the shed on field trips led by the librarian, who now spoke of Eliza with reverence instead of dismissal. She wasn't wrong. She told them she was early. Mara watched from the doorway, heart full in a way she didn't have words for. Even people who once mocked Eliza now admitted she'd seen what they were too comfortable to face. The mountain had shifted the whole town's story. And Mara realized the settlement wasn't payment. It was acknowledgement. A rewriting of a chapter long overdue. Winter returned quickly. Snow coated the ridge, muffling sound. Mara stood with Lily outside the shed, watching flakes thicken the footprints around them. "Do you think Grandma's secret really shook the whole town?" Lily asked. Mara considered the mayor's new water protection measures, the mining company's nervous press releases, the quiet apologies from old miners. "I think it shook the part that needed shaking," she said, "and reminded people that truth buried is still truth waiting." Sage nudged them gently, urging them toward the warm house. Later, they sat on the rebuilt porch drinking cocoa while the valley lights flickered on below. "Are we rich now?" Lily asked. Mara smiled. "Rich enough to keep the land safe?" she said. "And rich enough to give you choices." But her mind drifted to her grandmother, who died with nothing but a stubborn belief in her own truth. "We're rich in something else," Mara added quietly. "We get to finish her story." Lily leaned against her, small hands slipping into hers, warm despite the cold. The house creaked softly behind them, no longer in warning, but in comfort. Snow drifted in slow spirals across the yard. The mountain held them with gentle steadiness, as if acknowledging a long-settled debt. Mara looked into the dim, peaceful woods and felt something unclench inside her, a quiet acceptance that they were no longer running from life, but toward it. "We're home," Lily whispered. Mara nodded. "We are finally." The wind moved through the trees like a sigh of relief, carrying the truth Eliza hid for decades. Now free, now heard, now part of the mountain's living memory.